So for today's project, we have this gate that's installed in the privacy fence that surrounds the back lawn. This was installed a very long time ago. I'm not quite sure when. It was well before we got it, and I think it was before the last owner got it. It's got some age to it, and I have been unable to find anything like it. I suspect that whatever company made it is either no longer in business or no longer sold in this area. So finding an exact match is going to be awful troublesome. So what I'm decided to do is try and fix what's here. And the issues that it has, obviously you can see there's some pieces broken off both the top and the bottom. And then we also have the upper hinge on that right side gate is completely busted off. You can't quite see it in this picture, but it's just kind of held together with like one or two screws up there in that upper right corner. And it's got some more damage as people have opened and closed it since we bought it. And the last I left it, it was completely off its hinges. In this last picture, you can see that it's just kind of hanging out there at the top. The top's busted, the bottom's busted. And we got to get this fixed because this back lawn is where we keep the dogs, and we want a nice secure location for them to be able to roam freely in the back lawn. So, without further ado, we'll head over to the garage and we'll see what we can do to fix this plastic gate and make it sturdy once again. Alright, so here's our gate that we're going to try and fix. We've got slats broken off of it. The hinges were ripped out of it. And if you'll notice, the hinges run in a big slat through here. And for whatever reason, there is a 2x3 in there, but it was never run the full length. So these screws were just sticking out through the middle of nowhere. It's amazing they lasted as long as they did. Perhaps originally it may have gone through to here, and then at some point maybe they pulled out and somebody didn't realize and just screwed back to this rather than getting that 2x3 where it needs to be. Same situation down here where they weren't attached to that 2x3. So we're going to make a new 2x3, get that put in there. Tried to buy some from the local hardware store and they're completely sold out. Of course, this particular time in 2020, prices are through the roof on anything related to lumber, at least double what they were a year ago. So I'm going to try and use some scraps, or worst case I did buy a 2x4 for almost $6. Yeah, it's crazy. And I can cut it down on the table saw so it'll fit that hole rather than the 2x3 that should have been in there. And then for these guys, I have the piece that's on the ground. I am going to find a way to get that back on there. And my thoughts here are to take a 1x6, run it through the planer, and get it to fit in those slots, top and bottom. And then I have some screws that are pretty close to this color, and I'll just screw it in. Shouldn't really be able to see it unless you get right up close on it and stare at it. And hopefully that will give my structural support and fix our gate. And it should look just fine from the road, or even from the lawn for that matter. And then we can hang the gate back up. Probably going to be doing that in the dark tonight, so I don't know if I'll be able to get any footage of it. But we can work on getting the repair work done here. And this piece goes to the other side of the gate. It's actually a dual opening gate. Same situation with this one. Bottom corner was busted off. I'm going to make some pieces I can put in those slots to screw in when I get over there. As I suspected, this was cobbled in there. I had to remove the latch from the other side, and you can see now that this is not long enough to actually go all the way across. So it's attached on the left side, but not the hinge side. This piece fell out of the bottom, so at one point it was holding screws, but it certainly wasn't providing any kind of support all the way through. So this is the size I need to hit, but I need to get the entire length all the way across. So not only do we have support for the hinges and the latch, but we actually have physical support for the weight of the gate going across, because with only a little bit here all the way to the gates on just this little plastic piece where there wasn't any 2x3, in the same situation down there. So I will start working on cutting out a 2x3 to fit that. I need one for the bottom, one for the top. That I think is missing completely. I'm actually kind of glad that I'm making this out of a 2x4 instead of the 2x3, because the original 2x3 was in there. There's actually a fair amount of up and down slop. So where the screws in the hinge go, they're just barely tapping the edge, which you can see on the original piece where they were falling off the edge for support. A couple of them hit okay, but these are just no support at all, kind of dancing along the edge of it. So I'm going to make this as snug as I can when I put this on the table saw. So I'm just going to fast forward through this spot and spare you the agony of listening to me talk to myself for a good 5-10 minutes here. And what I'm doing here is just cutting down the 2x4 so it'll fit into the slots for the hinges and the end pieces there. And this should only take a few more seconds, and we'll have a nice good support board to go down through the center of those. We have percussive maintenance. That's right, I'm a 12-time limbo champion. So I made this nice and tight, but unfortunately I made it a little bit too tight. It's binding up about halfway through. So I'm going to have to get on board and pound it back out, and then I can run it through the planer bit or maybe the table saw and make it so it fits just a little bit better. Oops. So after another pass through the table saw, you can slide it in. The angle wasn't all that good, but it just slides right on in without any problem. And we can put this back on. I think before I do that, I will straighten it up a little bit. It's kind of bent. As I suspected, just a little bitty chunk that was on the other end of the bottom slat. Another sloppy contractor job. So we've got a nice new piece cut, full length, ready to go in. We'll just fast forward in voiceover, me talking to myself again, and get to the meat of the project here. Here's one on the floor. This one looks just fine. So I'm going to cut little slats of this, just wide enough to fit in there, and I'm going to have to run it through a planer to make it narrow enough to fit in there. I don't think this piece is going to be quite long enough for me. I'd rather have a little more support top and bottom, so I'm going to find one similar to this, but just a little bit longer. So here I'm mostly talking to myself again while I'm explaining how I'm taking the board and splitting it up into each of those 3 slots and running it through the planer so it's narrow enough to fit into those for support. I think I'll straighten these out first. So here I'm actually using the clamp on the vise to straighten that back into shape. Just the 2 sides of it, forcing it to be flat once more. Got it a lot straighter. I think we can do better though. For the final touch-up, I'm going to need to use a hammer. That's better. That's straight now. The other side's off. That's a lot better. That works for that. And this one was bent too, quite a bit. I'm thinking if I clamp here, I can straighten that in. That's significantly better. Still a little bit more to go though. This side, of course, is still bent. That's much better. That's straighter. That's straighter. I'm going to tap this side a little bit. Yeah, that's better. And this was way away from it. Now it's nice and straight in the mechanism. So we can screw that back on. Let's screw the bottom back on. And now I can use my planer. So now we just need to use the planer here to knock this down so it'll fit in these slots. Now they fit in there nice as can be. And we'll fast forward over this bit of me over explaining and talking to myself, but basically I'm using these slats that I just got to go into both the broken piece and the solid piece from the gate so that there's a nice firm support in between the two, and then I can screw them into place. There we go. So I'll take that right to the halfway point and then put a couple screws in that as soon as I figure out where I left them. Fortunately, I didn't have to look very far. They were literally right behind me. There's the screws I picked up, just some short exterior screws, enough to get through the plastic and go into the wood. Even came with a bit. So I want that to look uniform, so I'm going to use a square to mark where I'm going to put the holes on the other side, and I also want to do the same for up here. Here I'm just making sure the screws are straight across and uniform so it looks good when you do happen to spot the screws in the plastic and wood. So now drops right in place. I'm going to put a couple of screws on this side down here. I did have these screws in the back. I'd love to say I planned it that way, but it's just kind of how it fell together, which is good because this is going to be on the inside of the fence. We'll put some screws here to hold this down so it doesn't slide out, but we have nice, good, solid slat now. And then I'm going to use this to fix this other slat which goes to the other side of the gate. But there you have it. A very expensive gate that can't be duplicated anymore. Fixed with just a little bit of time. Some scrap 2x4s actually. And about $3 worth of new screws. And I hopefully will get a picture of the gate tomorrow in the daylight. Well, tomorrow ended up being about 3 months later, but here is the finished product. If you get right up close, you can see the seams where I repaired them, but from a few feet back, you can't tell the difference, which is what I was aiming for. I think they turned out pretty nice, and certainly a lot cheaper than doing an entire new fence.